Well, if you are ready, we can start. We are already recording. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to colleagues. It's a pleasure to have you in this panel discussion about what should be the first investments in parliamentary modernization. My name is Luís Kimaid. I'm the Executive Director of Bússola Tech. We are a global think tank or a research center about parliamentary modernization and digital transformation. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ciaran Doyle, the Assistant Secretary of the Oireachtas, also the CIO in the same parliament, Dr. Fotis Fitsilis from the Hellenic Parliament in Greece, Madame Rida Qazi from the Senate of Pakistan, and Marty Bickford, the Vice President of Xcential Legislative Technologies. Before we start, I have prepared a few questions for us to discuss the topic, but I want to invite each one of our participants very briefly in 1 minute to introduce yourself, tell you about your role in your parliament and how this is related to the topic that we have in the discussion today. I'll start with you, Ciaran. Ciaran, if you want to introduce yourself to the colleagues.
Hi, hello everyone. Yes, as Luís said, I'm the Chief Information Officer here in the Houses of Parliament in Ireland. It's called the Houses of the Oireachtas, and I've been with the Parliament 21 years now, almost 22. Would have started right at the bottom, working in the legislative and parliamentary processes side of the House, so have a good understanding of, I guess, how Parliament operates technically and physically, to process legislation, to deal with motions, parliamentary questions, and all the items of business that are generally found in a parliament. Also have the committees and our second chamber work, and that was very good grounding for about 4 or 5 years that I got in parliamentary activities and how Parliament ticks day to day. And then from there, I moved into IT back in about 2007 or 2008, and I suppose began to then move into infrastructure and operations, which gave me a really good, strong grounding in IT generally. And then about 2015, 2016, started to move into digital transformation and modernization of the Parliament, and we've been on that journey since then. So 10 years in now in terms of modernization and transformation. So that's really quick background and kind of how I've ended up in this field, in this area, and getting into these kind of global networks with Luís and other colleagues such as the IPU and the ECPRD for, you know, how parliaments need to catch up and modernise to stay relevant with the times. So that's me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ciaran. Fotis, would you like to introduce yourself to colleagues as well?
Thank you, Luís. Dear fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Fotis Fitsilis. I'm head of documentation in the research service of the Hellenic Parliament. At the same time, I'm a professor for parliamentary governance and artificial intelligence at Universidad Austral in Buenos Aires. And since 10 years, I'm leading a global initiative where Luís and Bússola Tech are also members. With the name Hellenic OCR Team. It's a global network for studying parliamentary data, and I think our today's discussion is quite relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fotis. Marty, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name is Marty Bickford. I'm with a company called Xcential Legislative Technologies. We focus on documents, XML systems, helping parliaments modernize and build new systems. And my background is here in Silicon Valley. I've been right out of college. I've worked here in Silicon Valley since the early 90s, and really pleased to be on such a distinguished panel. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Marty. Rida, would you like to introduce yourself to the colleagues as well? I think you're on mute, Rida. I think you're muted.
Okay, not very tech savvy of me today, is it? My name is Rida Qazi. I serve as the special advisor on initiatives and digital transformation to the Senate of Pakistan. Ours is a bicameral house, so we have the Senate and Ciaran, much like yours, we have the upper house and the lower house. So I'm advising the upper house on the digital transformation bit for now. My background is in public sector strategy consultancy. So I basically come in from laterally, and I enter and I tell you what you're doing wrong with your organization. So basically, I've been doing this now for 15 years, 16 years. This is my 16th year here in the capital. Worked with multiple organizations and written strategic plans for them, and that's basically what I'm doing at the Senate of Pakistan these days.
Thank you very much, Rida. Colleagues, allow me to start with my first question. I will invite you to answer, each one of you, in between 4 to 5 minutes. And I'd like to start with you, Ciaran. When we talk about modernization, parliaments, we often jump straight to specific digital tools or specific groups of technologies like artificial intelligence, or as a few years ago, there was the hype around blockchain, and we can name a few waves around specific tools. In your experience, what is the first movement that must come before even the technology itself, and how should the parliamentary institution should prepare itself for this transformation?
Yep. Thanks, Luís. It's a good question. I had a good think about it and made a couple of notes in preparing for today. And I think really the first thing is definitely it's a mental shift. I think you need to prepare yourself mentally for what actual modernization and transformation actually means. And that needs to happen ultimately at a whole of organizational level, but really at an executive level first. And if you're going to recognize what's happening around you, and then internalize that and see how you're going to then respond to that, you need to prepare yourself mentally for that, because it's a long, never-ending journey. And that's not to say it's not a thing worth doing, but just to say that you're in this game forever, and you will be in it forever, and you need to recognize that change, the only constant will be change hereafter once you begin to make changes in that way. So I think that's the first thing. It's a mental preparation that the organization needs to have. And it needs to come from top down to start with. So the top down people need to probably engage with in order to make the move happen strategically and at the scale and buy-in level that you need. It needs to be top down first. Ultimately, it needs to be very collaborative and driven through bottom-up processes and changes as well. But to begin with, you need the board on board and the chief executive of the board or your secretary general to understand that this is what's required, and the organization needs to move in this direction and set that direction for the organization. So first of all, it's mental, I would say. And then I think after that, you've probably got to look at more of the nuts and bolts around what that mental preparation then leads you on to. You need to understand where you are as a parliament, where you sit as a parliament in terms of your wider ecosystem nationally and internationally, and then how you function day to day. So you need to understand how we've gotten to where we are, why we operate the way we operate, how we operate the way we operate. And once you understand those aspects of it, then I think you're ready to begin to look at how it might change. And the very next important piece after that is you have to make sure that that change is collaborative and that everyone is bought in. Now, that doesn't mean it'll be smooth, and it doesn't mean it'll be easy, and it doesn't mean you'll have everybody agreeing, but it definitely has to come as a collective effort and a collective buy-in effort. So any transformation and change that's going to come about, everyone's bought into. How we went about it here in the Parliament, and I would imagine many other parliaments have done the same, is we would have conducted a full enterprise architecture engagement across essentially every business unit in the Parliament. We have probably like most parliaments, we have a corporate function and a parliamentary function and all sorts of other things going on, a public facing function with communications. So about 34 business units maybe. And you've got the members, and you've got the member staff and the political party staff that support them as well. So we needed to map all the business processes, all the applications, all the architecture, and all the data moving across those areas and between those areas and out from those areas to the public. And from there, then we were able to present a case for where we were, a shared understanding of where we were, and then incremental improvements over time to how we would change that and evolve that or revolutionize that, whatever was required in terms of the transformation and modernization overall. So I think that was a very important step for us. it wasn't easy. It isn't easy for any parliament. And I think even though we've talked about this in the past on other panels, I think because change is constant in organization, you have new people coming up and they don't know all these things and appreciate these things. And you need to communicate and create the structures to pass on and hand down this knowledge to people as they continue to take the organization forward. So when your time comes to an end or my time comes to an end in an organization, that you have created the conditions that allow for this change to continue on into the future. And to do that, you need to be really strong in your governance and your strategic work and your policy work, because they are the foundational rocks which will embed the culture that you need, a constant change culture that you need for the people coming up through them to learn the appropriate disciplines and governance that they're going to need to be able to take the next steps when people move on and leave the organization. So I think that's very important as well. And after that, then it's about doing, and the things that are going to help you do are, you probably want to codify this in a strategy and make it long-term, like, you know, a decade, I'd say, and recognize that that strategy is going to have to account for, you know, in letting the organization know that there will be resource requirements in terms of budget and people, and changes needed as a result to bring the change around, and that there'll also be a roadmap. It can't all happen evenly at the same time. It will be uneven in its delivery and execution. It'll come faster in some places than others to start with, and then other places will catch up or overtake. And you need to have a rough feeling for what that looks and feels like across your functions as an organization. And then finally, I suppose you need to recognize that you'll need several a portfolio of strategies underneath that main transformation and modernization strategy then as well. You know, like, you're going to need a cybersecurity strategy, you're going to need an AI strategy, you're going to need a data strategy, you're going to need a corporate function strategy, you're going to need a strategy for IT service and management for members, you know, because they're VIPs and they need to be treated differently, and as such, you know, and have a very high level of service to maintain good relations with the day-to-day functioning of the Parliament. So I think that's it. If I'm conscious of my time, so I don't want to hog it here, but that would be it. You need to prepare mentally, move collectively, develop, you know, then the structures and the frameworks and the documentation that's going to maintain that change after the organization moves on and changes, which it does over time anyway. So that they would be some of the key lessons I think people need to take on board when it comes to beginning modernization, beginning transformation.
Thank you very much, Ciaran, for your thoughts on this. Fotis, would you like to share your ideas to this question as well?
Sure. Thank you, Luís. Ciaran has made some excellent points, and obviously, it's we're going to probably have to repeat some of those. This is because this is literally the $1 million or multi-million-dollar question. Because any decision that the leadership takes literally costs lots of money, millions. So it better be good, well-founded, based on strategies and so on. I would like to touch upon what Ciaran said towards the end of his position. He said we have to think here strategically. We have to formalize everything within a strategy. I think this is an excellent first point. And usually, you know, when I'm thinking about questions like this, usually colleagues and myself, we try to take a step back. So these kind of changes in modernization processes, this is not the first time they're happening, right? So they have been happening in the past, maybe not so frequent, but indeed they were happening. So if there is some sort of institutional knowledge preserved throughout the ages, so you know what works and what not in your particular organization, because every parliament, of course, as we know, is different. So we might need to rely also upon some previous institutional knowledge. So, and what I would like to contribute to this discussion is the following. With our team, we have been studying these kind of changes for at least a decade, and what we figured out is that it's better. By the way, this works for many parliaments. It's better if you have in front of you some sort of framework that you are following, because there's a very high rotation when it comes to parliamentary leadership and political leadership overall. So it's not always the case that you have somebody that is highly experienced on board and taking all these decisions. So this is why we developed, first of all, a set of guidelines for the integration of artificial intelligence. And apart from the guidelines, we have also developed a framework for integrating emerging technologies. This can be anything, right? Not only artificial intelligence, you can name any technology that you would like, but this needs to be, as a technology, this new modernization element needs to be handled more or less similarly. So you need a strategy, of course. You need training. You need some sort of training facility or modality in order to train your people at any level. You need necessarily some sort of prioritization, because you cannot implement all the changes at once. Ciaran said the roadmap. This is exactly what it is. So you need to know what you do first, maybe the low-hanging fruits, as we used to call them. But for each parliament, this might be different. Then you need some sort of an implementation team. Will this happen within the organization? Will you use trusted third parties or in collaboration with other parliaments among peers? And finally, as the fifth step, we call this the five-step approach. You need a governance team. So how is the leadership is going to handle all this complexity and change within the organization? So these kinds of frameworks, we think it's important, and they're out there. I mean, they're publicly available, and we are at the disposal of any parliament to do a local assessment, because they apply globally, but they need to be implemented locally, and they need to be to take into account the local specificities and peculiarities of each institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fotis, for your remarks. Rida, would you like to share your considerations in this question as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think I agree with everything my colleagues have said previously, and there's absolutely no argument there that it needs any kind of modernization effort or any kind of transformation effort definitely requires a strategy. What we can all appreciate is that a strategy is never really a plan. A plan just, the plan formulates itself once the strategy is in place. So for us, here in Pakistan, in our parliament, I guess the challenge for me personally coming in and trying to modernize was to first establish what institutionally the clarity on the identity of the institution was. Like institutionally, I felt that there was a question around the legitimacy, the question around the sovereignty, the question around capacity, competence, people who formulate the parliament, whether they even appreciate who, where, why they're here, was really fundamental to moving the needle towards modernization. So, I mean, I'm conscious that this may be slightly different from what we have in mind when we talk about modernization, but I think that the reason these panels are so interesting is because there is perspective that you can take from perhaps my experience here, that not all parliaments in the world at the moment, even though we're all moving at an incredibly advanced pace, but in terms of technology, and we're all kind of adopting very fast, but we're not all there in terms of the identity of parliaments as a whole. So we've had that question here. So for me, I think when I try to answer this, and I try to answer the question around preparing the parliament for modernization, I think it's been first a question of identity, then the question of basically mapping how and what the workflows should look like, because those are, you'd again appreciate that those are not always very clear in terms of, they'd be codified in terms of rules of procedure and so on and so forth, but clarifying, responsibilities, figuring out how standardizing the parliamentary business is going to look like. That's usually, invisible work, but it's foundational to my efforts in transforming, this institution here. And I think equally important for me has been, sort of preparing and investing, like others have said, like preparing and investing in people. And that mental shift that, we've talked about, that mental shift requires really, truly investing in people, spending time with people, making sure that they understand what is it, the job that they do. And sometimes it gets lost in the doing of things, and you forget that, you have a certain role to play. So I feel that rather than, coming in and me bringing in my, fancy toolkits and my strategy plans and so on and so forth, I've had to deal with and tackle with, giving staff, parliamentary staff and parliamentary members, confidence in their ownership of the processes that they're in charge of, and then making sure that they have the tools via technology or otherwise to become, to enable them to really become better at what they do and to make this institution more effective. Right now, as we speak, we're in the middle of doing a strategic mapping. What that has meant is that for the first time in, say, the existence of this parliament, about 500 people have come together in a series of town halls, and they've, spoken openly about what they think their jobs are. And then that has given me, I'm right now sitting on a very rich pile of data that captures, everything that people think they ought to be doing, what they are doing over and above their duty. And now my, job kind of is to, streamline all of that, and so that, the processes become efficient, and that the institution keeps up with the times. So I think this kind of institutionally organic kind of strategic framework, as Dr. Pathos has talked about, is crucial in outlining the clarity and the interconnectivity of the processes that make up this entire parliament. So I appreciate that this is a little bit different from what we're saying, but I think many on the panel would appreciate that this is what we're sort of faced with here in a somewhat backwards part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rida, for your thoughts on this matter. Marty, would you like to comment as well?
Absolutely. So I'm also from a backwards part of the world right now. So being from America, so things can shift. I agree with everything everybody said. So I'm going to just add a few things. One is that I think it's really important to engage users. I think the biggest roadblock to any technology adoption in any industry that you're in a parliament, in a coffee shop, wherever you're at, is user pushback. And change management is the most difficult thing to do. And the bigger the project, the harder change management is. And I would suggest that any level of user preference, user personal preferences, user pushback should really not have any part of any decision-making process. In fact, I think it corrupts decision-making. And that's because if this is done late in the game, we could fail in adoption. If we take that feedback early, it can change our focus on what's important. And we need to build systems that are designed to do certain things, and it is the interaction of various pieces of a system that ultimately define what that system is. And we are building systems. We're not building one-off applications. We're not supporting one office that is disconnected from another office. We're designing an organizational system with the technology that we put in place. So I would recommend that we pacify our users early, and we commit to them that we will design applications from their perspective, that as we get to the edge of our systems, that we focus on user-centered design, because users have become very astute at understanding good interfaces versus bad interfaces. And ultimately, if I have a job to do, the interface that I do that job in is what I care about, and I want to be supported by the other pieces of that system. So commit to user-centered design early in the process, and commit to logical frameworks for decisioning. If users know that you're going to be logical about how you roll out technology and how you make decisions, and that ultimately you will care about their perspective from an interface perspective, they will give you a lot of room in terms of system design prioritization. So part of that is committing to a framework. And like Fotis said, frameworks are extremely important. I would recommend picking frameworks that are simple, frameworks that someone can Google. People do not remember, a lot of these come with acronyms. So one that probably everybody knows is OKRs, right? We define an objective and we define our key results. This framework is designed for to align strategy and align outcomes. It's not very good at multi-layered, right? So we might pick a framework like an OGSM that has layers built in. But the value of these frameworks is that we can elicit input and make logical decisions, but most importantly, it aligns us to our key objective. What is it that we're really trying to achieve? And whenever it comes to democratic parliaments, long-term support of those institutions is by far the most important thing. Not the specific policy that's going on at that moment, but the survival of the institutions. So if we all know, including users, that this is the objective and that we're going to be logical about how we make our decisions of organizational design, then we solve the change management problem, or at least we get ourselves a lot farther out and ahead of it than coming to the users, asking what they want, and then not being able to deliver what they want when they want, because we usually can't. Usually what we deliver is not everything that they asked for. So if we're focused on the mission, on the objective, and we're logical, we can, I think, survive some of the change management and survive some of the leadership changes through these types of frameworks. That's my little add to what everybody else already said.
Thank you very much, Marty, for your thoughts on this. And allow me to change the order a little bit for our discussion. And I would like to ask you, Marty, the next question. Which investment areas could act as a real enabler for subsequent waves for parliamentary modernization? Meaning, where can parliaments put resources and invest in their modernization that would enable them to new phases of modernization and not be an end in itself? And where does a first strategic investment can unlock multiple, how can I say, downstream gains for the parliament? And which areas tend to generate the highest leverage across the parliament? What are your thoughts on this?
So I'll start by saying the first thing to put aside is AI. AI is not magic. It's not going to solve our problems and get us leapfrogged ahead in terms of technical innovation. AI is very powerful on the edges of systems, right? But we need to focus on the cores of our systems first. We build systems from the inside out or from the bottom up, right? We don't build them from the outside in. And that's because ultimately systems make promises to one another. They have to deliver metadata and data and packets and packages of information. One person does a certain piece of work, it gets passed on to another person and on to another person, right? So the system has to work from the inside out. And I would say that what we want to do is focus on some basics. Authentication is important. The authentication will always bite you in the butt if you don't deal with it early, and it will cost you a lot of money later. And there are situations where you can put great things in place, but not be able to use them in the way that you want to because you haven't dealt with these identity and authentication issues early. So I would say start with authentication and identity. always use standards. Avoid vendor lock-in and focus on standards that are well adopted. Don't go after new standards, do things that are well adopted. And I'm talking about basics, right? But changing standardized technology, and a lot of the technology we deal with today is based on this principle, but standards have to always be a part of our thinking, and we standardize everything as we go. Because again, we're making promises, and repeatability in systems is of the utmost importance. Invest in API gateways. Components are going to be disparate. They're going to need to talk to each other. We want really good API gateways that will not only serve the system internally, it will serve the public as well. I would also say understanding your hosting and cloud functions and what your processor, do that early. That will benefit all pieces of the system. If you're working with internal staff or using outside vendors, third-party developers, understanding how your cloud infrastructure, how your source code delivery pipelines work, get that established early. You don't want to build aircraft carriers and parking lots. You want to build systems that start to work at the moment when they're ready and not have to do extra work later. And lastly, I would just say invest in staff. Keep people trained, keep people experimenting with new technologies, get them out there learning and what's going on. The more internal knowledge you have, you're going to work with outside vendors at some point. You want to have authority in terms of what system you want built and why. And you don't want to rely on vendors for your strategy. So build up your staff as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Marty, for your thoughts. Fotis, would you like to comment on that as well?
Sure. So, as said, I mean, we do not here need to reinvent the wheel. So all the recommendations and comments by our friends and colleagues were probably also accurate if they would be expressed, let's say, 10 years ago in the modernization effort of an early age. So the difference here is twofold. First, the main issue is that the technology cycles are much shorter. So this is one consideration that the leadership has to take into account. And second, that there is an elephant in the room, and it's called artificial intelligence, and is likely to cause more disruption in the institutional system and the legacy IT than any other technology in the past. These two elements combined cause actually the problems that we are encounter today. Now, specifically regarding the question that we are discussing right now. So, which investment areas should we prioritize? If you recall, one of the maybe dimensions, let me call it dimensions, that I mentioned earlier within the framework I presented is prioritization. Prioritization does not work similarly for every parliament. So every parliament is likely to have different priorities. And according to these priorities, it will invest its limited resources. Resources are always by default limited, in order to affect the necessary changes. So how do you do that? What we did is, relying on previous similar considerations, we developed, let's say, we call it an interactive exercise, where for every parliament in question that wishes to undergo this kind of exercise, the parliament designates a focus group. It is usually from 15 to 20 people within the organization, usually middle management and above. And we confront this focus group with a set of very specific questions. We're evaluating the responses of these people across two parameters, 2 dimensions: priority, so what we prioritize, and relevance, so how quick we want to have it. So what we want badly and how quick we want it. So if you combine this assessment, you create a 2-dimensional parameter space where you place all the different technologies and tools and services that the organization wishes to implement. And if you do this with a certain methodology that we have developed, then the outcome is a very powerful tool for the leadership, because exactly you see what your people wishes to have, and not some third party from outside that comes in with a specific agenda. So we have done this exercise till 2021, where we applied in Greece, of course, in our own parliament, in Argentina, in Brazil, and in Canada. And of course, we are offering this for any parliament that wishes to implement a very structured prioritization scheme for its workspace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fotis, for your considerations. Rida, would you like to share your comments to this question as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to think about here, right? I agree with Dr. Fatos that not every parliament looks at it differently. I think the prioritization exercise that you do right at the top end of this modernization effort or transformation effort really defines which direction you're going to lead in. But I think one commonality that we're seeing is this need for institutional infrastructure. I'm not talking about technology or computers or hardware. I think it's the systems and processes from which Marty was mentioning, that you need to pull the people out of those systems before you really sit down and define them. I think those systems that you put in place, that infrastructure that you put in place, I think, and then just put blinders on and say that this is it, this is what we're going to work with, and take the noise out. I think that is crucial. That is, and basically staying true to that is going to power any other change that you're going to try and bring. So for us here, I think really buckling down and getting our data ready, getting all our data digitized and ready. I'm not talking about AI or apps or anything like that. I'm talking about basically collecting everything and putting that in one kind of data wealth pool was key. I think for us, that kind of architecture has really sort of formed a very strong foundation on which to build on. For instance, if you look at committees, right, that's essentially where the oversight function of the parliament is, and I think that's common to many of us here on this call. I mean, if those compliance systems are not in place, that oversight can become a very painful subject, because you're at the risk of duplicating, you're at the risk of oversimplifying issues. So I think for us, like, what we've done is that this kind of data is going to create institutional memory. It's going to tell us how we don't want any of that to be basically lost out in the next round of work. So yeah, true that that memory function that the parliament has is crucial, and unless it's online somewhere now, we're at the risk of losing it. But I think this data infrastructure is what's really going to multiply our efforts. For us, really, like this, the key here is that if we can create these apps to be sort of interoperable, this data is searchable, we can communicate with other ministries from the Parliament sitting here using the similar, kind of APIs, the platforms that we're using. I think that's going to make a world of difference. The ability for us to interact with the public is going to, is going to really change. So, and I appreciate that, we're sort of coming at it from a very delayed perspective, really, because in 2015 or 16, when you were probably in other parts of the world thinking about this kind of transformation, we were basically essentially only thinking about a democratic transition to power. So parliaments were really losing, their identity, their sovereignty. So we were trying to, recoup those losses there. And now that we're here and the world has moved on so very quickly, I think we're, sort of scrambling to get that basis ready, so that we can get to the next step. So for me, I think one of the things that I have been really, really focused on is that good data architecture. And if I've got that, then I think I can, I can strengthen the, the multiple functions that we perform here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rida, for your thoughts. Ciaran, would you like to share your thoughts to this question as well?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think, look, really good points made by everybody, and I'd agree with everything everybody said there. So I don't have a lot to add, but I can probably put some of our own perspective on some of those points and just how you can maybe unlock some of that, in terms of where the investments begin to unlock. And I think I'd certainly agree. When I was making out a list myself, I had people down as probably the number one, that ultimately people are going to be the ones that get this done. When we launched our own digital transformation strategy years ago, our tagline, or one of them, was that, digital transformation will only happen if the people delivering the transformation meet the people who are responsible for the function and they work together to transform it. So people are going to be key, and you're going to have some people, you're going to have to develop some people, and this is a serious endeavor. For people need to become multidisciplined, they need to gain experience, and they need to stretch and grow, and you need to create a management structure that allows for that. But then you won't be able to just do that with the people you have. They will evolve and develop and become really strong and valuable over time, but you are going to have to buy in probably and recruit in important roles that you probably don't have yet, such as project managers and business analysts and solution architects and all these kind of roles that, you mightn't have it in your parliament. And then alongside that, then absolutely data is absolutely the key. And I think the biggest investment you can make, a real understanding of your data and a long-term data strategy are going to be key to that. What I would say is actually that's probably one of the places we're still playing catch up on ourselves. We've done a lot of good work with our data, but we've a lot of good work still ahead of us to do with data to get it where I'd like to see it for the organization, so it can match and come up to the level that we've achieved in other areas of the transformation and modernization already. I think it's important that you need to recognize that you need to invest in a development capability, both internal and external. I would say, that having an internal development capability is going to be vital at times, and then you probably might need an external one for scale and skills long term. So development and the ability to build things when you need to is going to be important. But build is more expensive than buy generally, and you've got to be able to have a team of people out of your EA, your enterprise architecture review, who can develop that vision per program and per area for what, bespoke development doesn't have to happen, and what tools you can buy in the market instead to meet the needs of the organization, maybe in your corporate function or whatever. And it's very important that you have what we have now, a digital team, like people who can work with the people, sit in a business process, understand it very well, but also do the IT and technical thinking then beyond that to complement the work of the business unit, to understand what's required from the market and how to, I guess, purchase or procure the best solution for the organization, and one which will integrate and automate and make things more efficient as well. So that's a really important point. And then one of the early investments you've really got to make when you're beginning to build up and develop at scale, hopefully, and when I say develop, I mean grow the modernization over time, is you really need to deliver. You have to execute, and you have to have a very strong focus on delivery. And to do that, you probably need to establish really strong governance and a program management office that is going to hold the line on delivery and delivery focus for your teams of people, because the work is very hard, but you would need a dedicated team of people who can sit outside of the work and drive the work for you and hold the standard up. So I think these are very important early investments that you need to be looking at in order to unlock kind of potential and unlock the investments you've made downstream. And then maybe to finish, what I'd say is, you know, you'd ask the question, which areas tend to generate the highest leverage of, you know, across the institution. So obviously, I think it's public facing, and anything that's innovative and efficient for the members and parliamentary business itself are where the key value points are, or the key value points we look to stress, right? Because they are ultimately the people who will back your ongoing transformation and modernisation. So you want to be sure, are the workings of the Parliament clear to everyone, including the members and the public? Are they as efficient as possible? And if not, how will they become as efficient as possible over time? Is the information available and ready to hand to people when they need it? And, you know, ways you're going to achieve that in the early days are your website, you know, and the streaming of your content and the access to your data, say, of your parliamentary debates or your committee debates or whatever it is. So I think these are the spaces you can invest in early to get quick returns, although quick may still be at the rhythm of 1 to 2 years when you've got to do all the work. And I really like the point that Marty was making earlier about customer, and there's an important line there between collaboration and kind of, you know, guiding people as well. And from working outside of Parliament, you know, in the private sector before coming in here, I would agree strongly with the kind of motto where, you know, the customer is king, but the customer isn't always right either, right? So you've got to remember that you're delivering for people, but they don't always have all the answers, and they can get in their own way or your way at times. And you need to find that balance of recognizing that the customer is king, and you need to deliver for them, and you need to maybe sometimes deliver for them in ways that they can't get to and imagine, but you also need to recognize that they're king as well, and that's very important in delivery.
Thank you very much, Ciaran, for your thoughts to this question. Colleagues, due to our advanced time, our friend Fotis has another appointment. I'm proposing that we join the last 2 questions, and he has kindly requested to speak first if you don't have any objections. And Fotis, of course, and since there are 2 questions, you can use more time to answer them. And well, the question would be, when parliamentary modernization over a multi-year horizon, how do you design a roadmap that can survive the political turnover, leadership changes, and the shifting priorities without freezing innovation or restarting from zero in every cycle? That's something some of you touched in the first question. I'd like to deep dive on this. And secondly, many of the planning choices we discuss here today condition what parliaments can realistically do with AI later on. So the second question would be, which of today's modernization decisions will most directly shape how AI is used in parliamentary work over the next few years? Fotis?
Since we have to merge the 2 questions, I will also merge my answers into one. So, you know, Luís, we thought very hard about this. So how can you meaningfully plan and long-term and design a roadmap while having these short cycles? So it makes actually little sense to have a rigid framework. You need to be very agile. You need to be also in managerial wise, in terms of management practice, you need to be very agile. And this contradicts directly traditional parliamentary or let's say institutional approaches that used to be very, very rigid and difficult to change because they require political consensus and so on. So what we thought that might be here a solution is actually to mitigate the risks related to modernization. And you know, since Parliament is an institution, a standalone institution, usually in the governance system, we have deliberately taken the political decision and the technical decision as well to link our modernization efforts, specifically regarding to artificial intelligence, to the national high-performance computing infrastructure. So in the European Union, we have this HPC, high-performance computing infrastructure, that it's called the AI factory. There are 19 now established and becoming more and more. This is a public infrastructure, right? This is EU money, European Union, co-funded with a national state. And what we did is, in a rather spectacular action, we signed an MOU. The Parliament signed an MOU with the Line Ministry, the Ministry for Digital Transformation. So that we don't have the money in the Parliament, we don't have the capacity nor the expertise, so we outsource all this. What we know is the parliamentary processes, and we will support this AI factory and their experts, the Greek, European, to help us develop these tools and services that we need in the years to come. And probably we will need more and more, and ever-changing processes in ever-changing manner. And we decided that the best way is to outsource this risk, so that we can dedicate ourselves on what we know better, and this is the Parliament, and not the technical considerations around this. Thank you very much. I need to apologize for leaving early. I wish you all the best in the remaining part of this panel, and of course, Luís, I'm looking forward to seeing you again very soon in one of your next panels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fotis, for your considerations and for your participation today. Allow me to invite Rida to share her thoughts to this question. Rida, would you like to share your considerations to these two questions as well?
Yes, thank you, Luís, with pleasure. My thought on this is in two parts, right? Parliaments are inherently political places. They are, they're the product of a long and hard-fought battle on a political ground. And these people who form the membership of the parliaments, this is notwithstanding that the parliamentary staff sometimes is a product of, administrative excellence and competence and so on and so forth. But most often in our part of the world, the parliamentary staff is also a combination of political implants, people who have just kind of parachuted into the system, and they are now forced to call it home for 5, 10, 15 years, however much long they're going to stay. So for me, I think appreciating that and then figuring out that how do you go from creating a system that works for everyone, system that anyone can basically quickly adopt and become familiar with, requires a lot of road mapping that can survive political turnover. Now, in our case, there's also a very healthy amount of tradition that we need to upkeep, so that the parliaments don't lose their essence. The parliament doesn't lose its old history, its old so we've got to be conscious of all of these things while we're talking about these long change plans. And I think one of the things that's worked for me while remaining conscious of all of this is to think in terms of building blocks, right? I mean, these small incremental modular reforms that you can introduce that are ultimately embedded in very clear systems that make the Secretariat function, regardless of who is operating them. The easier the systems are to follow, the easier it is to sort of withstand the forces that come in and threaten to change them. One is that, and then I'm conscious of time, so I'm sort of making this concise, but I can go on about this, but I think the other thing is the concept that we've talked about earlier is that of collective ownership, right? I think as long as people can collectively, extract some kind of benefit from the system that they're forced to operate in, I think they'd be willing to feed the machine with good and better work. And lastly, I think situating that change management strategically, being conscious that it's a political organization, being sort of aware that priorities do change with incoming leadership. I think situating the change management in a place that insulates it from basically getting affected negatively or getting negatively impacted or being thrown out in the next cycle. I'm looking at you, Marty. I can see a lot of things that's that the US has had to throw out because of leadership change, development funding being one of them. Just on a side note, but I think just situating that change in a place that is insular, that protects itself from that leadership coming in and changing it is really critical. And I think just sort of to end, I think our ability to adopt to these new and emerging technologies is only going to be strengthened if we remain accountable, if we remain focused on the system that we've developed, if we remain true to the system that we've developed, and then the adoption comes quite easily. I don't see that there'd be any staff who'd be willing to do things in a long way if there's a shorthand way to do something or a simpler way to do something. So I think really investing in those things can essentially really turn out to be the true North Star here. So those are my views on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your considerations, Rida. Marty, would you like to share your thoughts to this question as well?
Absolutely. I think the first part of the question, in terms of surviving political leadership, the other panelists have a lot more experience with that. And what I will say to that is that I do believe that in the private sector, our concern is usually retaining customers and how we keep customers on board when there's leadership changes. And what we tend to focus on are, again, back to the frameworks, logical frameworks that lay out so that people can see their objectives, what they're trying to accomplish reflected in that, and continue to get buy-in, continue to adjust those to match what is true. And so those frameworks provide some what we call moral authority. I think there's a couple of other places to pick up moral authority, which is useful whenever you have to argue with people. So one is are these logical frameworks that they could recognize, that they participate in, that they contribute and adjust. The other one is something that Rita had mentioned earlier, which is workflow. If you understand how the systems work, how the users, what jobs everybody does, how jobs are connected from one person to another, and you're the person who can lay that out and explain that to people, that also provides you with moral authority. It gives you the right to say, this person needs that data to be normalized and move over here, right? So that helps in terms of dismissing pet projects and changing priorities when you understand the full system, when you're the actual architect for how the system will function. The other thing I would say there is technical authority is important, and that's again why you need a strong team. Being able to explain, here's our objectives, here's the workflow, how everybody's going to work, and here's how we build the system. We start from the bottom up and the inside out, and you can explain how that technical approach matches the workflow. Again, I don't have to fight with politicians, but I do think that generally works whenever you're trying to convince people. But I'm not the biggest authority when it comes to the politics side. On the AI side, I do have some strong perspectives. I have been in Silicon Valley my whole career. Our job in Silicon Valley, we have seen it as destroying institutions and building them back up again, creating anarchy and then putting new structures in place that we benefit from. I think AI is no different than that. And I think the job as a citizen, I believe the job of the governments is to understand the impact of AI, to understand what it is going to do to our economies, to our jobs, to our long-term stability, to our understanding of truth, to get super philosophical. But I don't believe that governments have to use AI and implement AI themselves to understand that. So I would caution governments to not jump into the deep end of AI into an ever-changing, dynamic thing. AI is not done changing. It has just started, and it's not reliable, and it's not repeatable. So I would say experiment with AI, prepare for your systems for AI, but don't feel the need to jump in and start using it. It's not a shortcut. You're going to run into problems. If you've tried to develop applications with AI so far, you've run into lots of things that are very problematic. And one of the most important things is repeatability. We all have used consumer level AI. You can't ask it the same question and get the same answer. And that is true of most of the models, right? If we think about what we think about as AI today, as generative AI, not machine learning that is deterministic and we can build it up, but this probabilistic AI that we deal with today is not a reliable partner, and neither are the companies who are generating or making this AI. They're not reliable partners. They're not democratic. We have to be careful. So I would caution folks about jumping into the deep end. Understand it, experiment with it, and prepare for it. And the best way to prepare for AI is to standardize your data, to standardize your document structures, to standardize the things that you want it to digest and understand. Structure inside of documents matters to the reliability of the answers that you get from AI today. And we expect that to be true because this is all about knowledge and understanding of human language. This is the big benefit of AI, is that it understands us when we talk as normal humans. That is the big win of AI today. So help it understand your own data and your own documents through structure and through standards, but don't feel the need to spend millions of dollars investing in it because it's changing. There will be a new model that comes out tomorrow, and it won't function the same as the model that is out today. 5.3 will be out any day, and it will change the answer that it gives you to the same question you asked it today. So I would just be careful. We all know what these AI companies are up to. It's no good. And so be careful of them. Structure your data. This will benefit your workflows. It'll benefit your systems, and it will prepare you for the future. And I am from Silicon Valley. I'm a Luddite. I do like AI, but I just think we need to be careful with it. That's all.
Thank you very much, Marty, for your thoughts. Ciaran, I'll hand you the keys to close our discussion today and share your thoughts on these two questions as well. So feel free to share your considerations.
No problem. Look, just really good points I think made by all the panelists around it, and picking up on the themes out of that. I think, you know, the change is a real thing. It does happen. There are shifting political priorities. That is the reality on the ground, and we have found that very hard, actually, at times here in the Oireachtas. And I would really go along with Marty there in terms of you need to be undeniable, because at times this is a battle. You know, transformation and change and modernization can often be an arm wrestle or a fight, and you need endurance for that and resilience. But then you also need expertise, and you need to be undeniable. So you need to have walked the path, understood the logic, and be able to articulate that very clearly and concisely to people in order to get people to where you need them to be, or to stay the course when they're looking to change things. So being undeniable is a phrase we use in here, or certainly I use anyway, for transformation and modernization. You need to be able for what's ahead of you, and that means the changing, shifting political dynamics. And the only thing that's going to resource you well, besides yourself and your own abilities, are the knowledge you accumulate and the teams you build up to be able to make those arguments when the time comes. So that's a really important point. It's really just another way of expressing, I think, what both Rida and Marty have said, you know. So, but it's just through lived experience, I guess that's how we have termed it in here. So that's just a more colourful way of maybe putting it. I suppose then one of the other things that helps with doing the undeniable piece is ground it in really good kind of international strategic directives. In our case, what the EU is saying we should do, our national strategies in terms of what our own government is saying as well, because they set out long-term strategic directives at a European and national scale for us. We need to internalize them and figure out what that means for us as a parliament, and then work towards those. See the good for the good that's in them for what it is, and recognize then how we need to actually do that work. So you need to be able to do that. And then I think what I have found very helpful in here in this parliament is the ability to benchmark and peer benchmark internationally. So to be able to say, this is what our colleagues in Greece or Portugal or Spain or Brazil or whatever it happens to be are doing. They have walked this path already. We are not on bleeding edge. We are maybe more leading edge, in terms of following, and we are able to walk this path as well. And we have found people who are maybe behind us in other areas, but ahead of us in certain areas. And that collaboration and peer review and peer engagement internationally is very valuable when it comes to shifting an organizational mindset or staying the course when political winds change. So we have found that very helpful. And I think another aspect to that then is you need to look beyond your peers and the parliamentary sector, which we operate in. You need to look at the private sector. You need to be very conscious and highly aware of how user experiences are now and how they are changing over time, because the private sector are driving the innovation at scale, globally. And you need to watch that as it changes and be aware of that as it changes and the iterations that it's going through, and look at what best in class looks like. Be aware that public-facing applications on a scale for streaming of content or, banking or whatever it happens to be, have been through decades of iterative change at this point. And they are refined and they are efficient. And therefore, you need to be really mindful of those and how customer expectation has evolved and developed over time, and how that customer expectation will be pointed at your own services and products that you provide people. So how do you be eclectic in looking at best in class globally among your peer group, but internationally as well, across the private sector functionality, and how you need to internalize that into your own service and content delivery as well. So I think that's a massive point to be aware of. I'm sure everyone is doing it, but I think it's one worth mentioning, as well. And then I suppose I was looking at the question around shifting priorities is interesting, right? Because it's a reality. It's going to happen. You're going to have to face it and work through it when the challenge comes. But I actually think a lot of people involved in this work are actually doing that maybe unbeknownst to themselves already, because the landscape is always changing. Transformation was a big thing in the teens. Then cyber became huge. Now it's AI, and your data in relation to your AI. So we are flexible and adaptive by nature, by working in the field we're in. I think many people anyway, when they're looking to modernize, when they're looking to transform, and they've found this field of work and want to stay in it, I think it's important to recognize that you are this kind of person and you are these kind of teams that are able to be adaptive and flexible when the time comes, because you're doing it naturally anyway. You operate in a field where it's required. So when it happens politically around you and the people maybe you report up to or the people you have to serve services to, be aware that you're doing this already, and that you can take these challenges on and deal with them by doing the things we talked about earlier. I mentioned earlier, which Rida and Marty had already brought up. Be resilient, benchmark, be ready for a fight, and be consistent and be undeniable, and recognize that you're doing all of this already through your day-to-day job. So I think that's a really important point. And then finally, I suppose on the point on the other question, which I probably won't go into as deeply because I'm conscious of the time, is it was about the early choices we're making now, and the things that are going to most directly shape how AI is being used, particularly in Parliament over the years. I mean, it's obvious, and the other panelists have spoken to it. It's data, right? You need to be on top of your data, and then you need a governance which is complementary. It can't skew left or right. It needs to be straight down the middle in terms of we care about governance and alignment to international law and ethics and all the print and trustworthiness and all the good things that come with AI, but we are also innovative. and we are scanning the horizon to see which way the winds are blowing and what's changing. And these two things need to coexist and remain confident in each other, so they don't one doesn't dominate the other, and we don't get a chilling effect from the governance side over the innovation side, and the innovation doesn't run away with itself and lose control and put the organization in jeopardy. So I think that's a really important thing, your data and a coexisting governance which complements each other, and building that it will be key, or is key and will be key into the future still. So they're just the quick points I have on the AI question.